The story of honey begins in a field of flowers, where blossoms open to the warmth of the sun. The flowers grow in quiet clusters, their petals unfolding slowly as the day brightens. Each flower holds within it a small reservoir of nectar, a sweet liquid that the plant produces deep within its bloom. The nectar waits there, protected by the petals, ready to serve its purpose in the life of the plant. Bees live in hives, structures that may be natural or created by beekeepers. Inside the hive, thousands of bees work together in a pattern that has been followed for countless generations. The hive is organized and purposeful, with each bee playing a role in the survival of the colony. Some bees care for the young, some build and maintain the honeycomb, and some venture out into the world to gather food. The bees that leave the hive to collect nectar are called forager bees. These bees fly out on warm days, moving from flower to flower in search of nectar and pollen. Their flight is steady and determined, covering distances that seem vast for such small creatures. The forager bees have been to these flowers before, or they follow the guidance of other bees who have discovered promising blooms. When a forager bee lands on a flower, it moves carefully across the petals until it reaches the center where the nectar is stored. The bee extends its tongue, a long thin tube designed for drawing up liquid. The nectar is sipped slowly, collected drop by drop, until the bee has gathered what it can carry. The bee's body is covered in fine hairs, and as it moves around the flower, pollen grains stick to these hairs. This pollen will be carried to the next flower, helping the plants to reproduce. The forager bee visits many flowers during each trip away from the hive. Its body gradually becomes laden with nectar and dusted with pollen. The nectar is stored in a special part of the bee's body called the honey stomach, separate from its own digestive stomach. The honey stomach expands as it fills, and when it can hold no more, the bee begins the journey back to the hive. The flight back to the hive is direct and purposeful. The bee navigates using the sun and landmarks, following a path it has learned through experience. Other bees may be traveling the same route, creating small airways of traffic between the flowers and the hive. The bee returns heavy with its cargo, landing at the entrance of the hive and moving inside to deliver what it has gathered. Inside the hive, the forager bee finds a house bee, one of the workers whose role is to receive and process the nectar. The forager bee regurgitates the nectar from its honey stomach, and the house bee takes it in, beginning the next stage of the transformation. This passing of nectar from bee to bee is part of a careful process that will eventually turn the thin, watery nectar into thick, concentrated honey. The house bee holds the nectar in its own honey stomach, but it does not simply store it there. The bee's body adds enzymes to the nectar, special proteins that begin to break down the complex sugars in the nectar into simpler sugars. This chemical change is essential to creating honey. The enzymes work slowly, altering the composition of the nectar while it is held inside the bee. After holding the nectar and allowing the enzymes to work, the house bee moves to the honeycomb. The honeycomb is a structure made of wax, formed into hexagonal cells that fit together perfectly. The bees build this comb themselves, producing wax from special glands in their bodies and shaping it into the familiar pattern. Each cell in the comb is a small storage container, waiting to be filled with nectar that will become honey. The house bee deposits the enzyme-enriched nectar into an empty cell. But the nectar is still quite thin and contains a lot of water. For it to become honey, much of this water must be removed. The bees accomplish this through a process of evaporation, which they facilitate in several ways. The bees spread the nectar across many cells rather than filling each one completely at first. This increases the surface area exposed to the air, allowing water to evaporate more quickly. The thin layer of nectar in each cell begins to lose moisture to the air inside the hive, gradually becoming more concentrated. The bees also work to control the temperature and airflow within the hive. On warm days, some bees position themselves near the entrance and beat their wings rapidly, creating a current of air that flows through the hive. This moving air carries away the moisture that evaporates from the nectar, preventing the humidity inside the hive from becoming too high. The steady fanning of wings continues for hours, a patient effort to create the right conditions for the nectar to transform. As the water content decreases, the nectar becomes thicker and sweeter. The sugars become more concentrated, and the enzymes continue to work on the chemical structure. The house bees move the nectar from cell to cell, sometimes taking it back into their honey stomachs to add more enzymes before depositing it again. This process of collection, addition of enzymes, and evaporation continues until the nectar has been transformed into honey. Honey is ready when its water content has been reduced to a level where it will not ferment or spoil. The bees can sense when this point has been reached. The honey is now thick and flows slowly, quite different from the thin nectar that was originally collected from the flowers. The bees move the finished honey into cells designated for long-term storage. Once a cell is filled with honey, the bees seal it with a thin layer of wax called a cap. The cap protects the honey from absorbing moisture from the air and keeps it fresh. The sealed cells form a reserve of food that the colony can draw upon when flowers are not blooming and fresh nectar is not available. This stored honey will sustain the hive through periods of cold weather or scarcity. The beekeeper, a person who tends to the hives and cares for the bees, monitors the hive's progress throughout the season. The beekeeper wears protective clothing when working with the hives, as bees will defend their home if they feel threatened. The protective suit covers the beekeeper from head to toe, with a veil over the face to prevent stings. Gloves protect the hands, though some beekeepers prefer to work without them to maintain better sensitivity and control. The beekeeper approaches the hive calmly and gently. Sudden movements or loud noises can agitate the bees, so the work is done slowly and with respect for the bee's space. Before opening the hive, the beekeeper may use a smoker, a device that produces cool smoke from burning natural materials like pine needles or wood shavings. The smoke is puffed gently near the hive entrance and into the hive when it is opened. The smoke has a calming effect on the bees. When bees detect smoke, their instinct tells them there may be a fire, and they respond by consuming honey to prepare for a possible evacuation. Engorged with honey, the bees become less defensive and more docile. The smoke also masks the alarm pheromones that bees release when they feel threatened, preventing a defensive response from spreading through the hive. With the bees calmed by the smoke, the beekeeper carefully opens the hive. The hive is typically a wooden box with removable frames inside. Each frame holds a section of honeycomb built by the bees. The beekeeper lifts out a frame and examines it, looking to see how much honey has been stored and whether the cells are capped with wax. The beekeeper only removes frames that are mostly capped, indicating that the honey is fully ripened and ready. Frames that still have uncapped cells or contain developing bees are left in the hive. The beekeeper must be careful to leave enough honey for the bees themselves, as they depend on these stores for their own survival. Taking too much honey could weaken or even destroy the colony. The frames selected for harvest are carefully lifted from the hive and placed in a covered container to protect them from other bees who might be attracted to the honey. The beekeeper works methodically, checking each frame and selecting only those that are ready. The hive is then closed up again, with the remaining frames and bees left undisturbed to continue their work. The frames full of capped honey are transported to a place where the honey can be extracted. This might be a dedicated honey house, a room in a building, or even a clean space in a garage or barn. The area must be clean and protected from insects, as the sweet smell of honey attracts many creatures. The frames are set aside temporarily, waiting for the extraction process to begin. Before the honey can be extracted from the comb, the wax caps that seal the cells must be removed. This step is called uncapping. The beekeeper uses a special knife or tool designed for this purpose. The uncapping knife may be heated to make it slide more easily through the wax. The beekeeper holds the frame over a container and carefully runs the knife along the surface of the comb, slicing off the thin layer of wax caps. The cappings fall away from the comb, revealing the honey inside the cells. The wax cappings are collected in the container below, and they still contain small amounts of honey. These cappings will be processed separately to recover the honey they hold and to harvest the clean wax. The uncapped frame now shows hundreds of open cells, each one filled with golden honey. Both sides of the frame must be uncapped, so the beekeeper turns it over and repeats the process on the other side. The work is done carefully to avoid damaging the comb structure, as the comb can be returned to the hive for the bees to use again. Preserving the comb saves the bees considerable effort, as building new comb requires a significant amount of energy and resources. Once the frames are uncapped on both sides, they are ready for the extractor. A honey extractor is a cylindrical device that spins the frames to remove the honey from the comb using centrifugal force. The extractor may be manual, turned by hand with a crank, or it may be powered by a motor. Inside the extractor, the frames are placed in a cage or basket that holds them securely. The beekeeper loads the uncapped frames into the extractor, arranging them evenly around the center to maintain balance. If the extractor is a manual one, the beekeeper begins to turn the crank, slowly at first and then with increasing speed. If it is powered, the motor is started and gradually brought up to the proper speed. The frames spin inside the extractor, and the honey is flung out of the cells by the centrifugal force. The honey hits the walls of the extractor and runs down to the bottom, where it pools. The spinning continues for several minutes to ensure that most of the honey has been extracted from the comb. Then the extractor is stopped, the frames are removed and flipped if necessary to extract honey from the other side, and the process is repeated. The comb, now mostly empty of honey, remains intact on the frames. The structure of the wax cells is still whole and can be returned to the hive for the bees to refill. This saves the bees the work of building new comb and allows them to focus their energy on gathering nectar and producing more honey. The extracted honey collects at the bottom of the extractor. It is a thick, viscous liquid, golden or amber in color, depending on the flowers the nectar came from. The honey contains small particles of wax, bits of pollen, and occasionally a bee part or two. Before the honey can be bottled and stored, it must be filtered to remove these impurities. The beekeeper opens a valve or gate at the bottom of the extractor, allowing the honey to flow out into a container. The honey moves slowly, pouring in a thick stream that folds over itself as it accumulates. The container is usually a food-grade bucket or tank, large enough to hold the harvest from several frames. From the collection container, the honey must pass through filters to remove unwanted particles. The filtering is done in stages using screens or cloths with progressively finer mesh. The first filter might be a coarse screen that catches the larger pieces of wax and any other debris. The honey passes through the screen slowly, its thickness making the process take time. After the coarse filtering, the honey moves to a finer filter. This might be a cloth strainer or a fine mesh screen that removes smaller particles, including tiny wax fragments and pollen grains that are larger than desired in the finished honey. The honey seeps through the filter gradually, pooling below in a clean container. Some beekeepers use multiple layers of filtering, each one finer than the last, to ensure that the honey is clear and free of visible particles. The filtering process is slow and cannot be rushed. The honey's thickness means that gravity pulls it through the filters at its own pace. The containers of honey may sit for hours or even overnight as the filtering completes. While the honey filters, tiny air bubbles that were incorporated during extraction rise to the surface. These bubbles form a light foam on top of the honey. This foam also contains wax particles and other fine debris that is lighter than the honey itself. The beekeeper can skim off this foam, further purifying the honey. Once the honey has been filtered, it is clean and ready for storage or bottling. The honey is still in large containers at this point, and the beekeeper must decide how it will be packaged. Honey can be stored in bulk containers for later use, or it can be bottled immediately in jars of various sizes for sale or personal use. Before bottling, the honey may be gently warmed to make it flow more easily. Honey becomes thicker and more viscous when cold, and warming it slightly reduces its viscosity and makes it easier to pour into jars. The warming must be gentle and not too hot, as excessive heat can damage the beneficial enzymes and alter the flavor of the honey. Many beekeepers warm the honey by placing the container in a warm room or using a specially designed warming cabinet. The jars for the honey are clean and dry, ready to be filled. The beekeeper may use a honey gate, a valve on the side of the storage container that allows controlled pouring, or a bottling tank with a spigot at the bottom. The honey flows from the container into the jars, filling them with the golden liquid. Each jar is filled to a consistent level, leaving a small space at the top. The jars are filled slowly to avoid incorporating air bubbles, which can make the honey look cloudy and less appealing. As each jar is filled, the beekeeper moves it aside and places an empty jar under the flow, continuing until all the honey has been bottled or until the jars are full. Once filled, the jars are sealed with lids that fit tightly to keep air and moisture out. Honey is hygroscopic, meaning it absorbs moisture from the air, and this can cause it to ferment if too much moisture is absorbed. A tight seal prevents this and keeps the honey fresh for a very long time. Properly stored honey can last for years without spoiling. Labels may be applied to the jars, identifying the honey and providing information about its source. The label might indicate the type of flowers the bees visited, the location of the hive, and the beekeeper's name. Some honey is sold as varietal honey, meaning it comes primarily from one type of flower, such as clover, orange blossom, or wildflower. The flavor and color of honey vary depending on the floral source of the nectar. The wax cappings that were removed during the uncapping process still contain honey and are valuable in their own right. These cappings are collected and processed to extract the remaining honey and to harvest the clean beeswax. The cappings are placed in a container where the honey can drain out, often with the help of gentle warmth. As the cappings sit, the honey trapped in them slowly drips down and is collected below. This honey is often considered to be of very high quality, as it has been in contact with the fresh wax. Once most of the honey has drained away, the wax cappings can be melted and filtered to produce clean beeswax. Beeswax is useful for many purposes. It can be used to make candles, cosmetics, and various household products. The wax is melted gently, and any remaining honey is separated out. The clean wax is poured into molds to form blocks or cakes that can be stored and used as needed. The honey that has been bottled is now ready to be stored, sold, or consumed. Honey should be kept in a cool, dry place away from direct sunlight. It does not need to be refrigerated and will remain good for a very long time if stored properly. Over time, honey may crystallize, forming sugar crystals that make it thick and grainy. This is a natural process and does not mean the honey has gone bad. Crystallized honey can be returned to a liquid state by gently warming it. The jar can be placed in warm water, and the heat will dissolve the crystals, returning the honey to its smooth, flowing consistency. Some people prefer crystallized honey, as it spreads more easily and has a different texture that they find appealing. The flavor of honey varies depending on the flowers that the bees visited. Light-colored honey, such as clover or acacia honey, tends to be mild and sweet. Darker honey, such as buckwheat or heather honey, has a stronger, more robust flavor. The color and flavor are determined by the minerals, enzymes, and pollen present in the nectar, which in turn depend on the types of flowers available to the bees. Beekeepers who want to produce varietal honey may place their hives in areas where a particular type of flower is abundant and blooming. For example, hives placed in an orange grove during blooming season will produce orange blossom honey. The bees may visit other flowers as well, but if the target flower is plentiful, the majority of the nectar will come from that source. Raw honey is honey that has not been heated or filtered extensively. It may contain small amounts of pollen, propolis, and wax, and it retains all of the natural enzymes and nutrients present in the honey. Some people prefer raw honey for its additional components and its closer connection to the natural state of the product. Raw honey is more likely to crystallize than filtered honey, but this is seen as a sign of its unprocessed nature. Creamed honey, also known as whipped honey or spun honey, is honey that has been crystallized in a controlled way to create a smooth, spreadable texture. The honey is stirred regularly as it crystallizes, breaking up the sugar crystals and keeping them small. The result is a honey that has a thick, creamy consistency that spreads easily and does not drip. Honeycomb honey is honey that is sold still in the wax comb. A section of comb is cut from the frame and placed in a jar, with liquid honey poured around it or the comb left as is. Eating honeycomb honey means consuming the wax along with the honey. The wax is edible and often chewed like gum before being discarded, though it can also be swallowed. The bees continue their work throughout the warmer months, gathering nectar and producing honey as long as flowers are blooming. The beekeeper checks the hives regularly to ensure the bees are healthy and have enough space to store their honey. If the frames become full and there is no room for the bees to store more honey, they may stop foraging or even prepare to swarm, leaving the hive in search of a new home. To prevent this, the beekeeper may add more boxes to the hive, providing additional frames for the bees to fill. These boxes, called supers, are stacked on top of the existing hive structure. The bees move upward into the new space and build comb on the new frames, expanding their storage capacity. A healthy hive can produce a significant amount of honey in a season, far more than the bees need for their own survival. This surplus is what the beekeeper harvests, taking only the excess and leaving enough for the bees to sustain themselves. The relationship between beekeeper and bees is one of mutual benefit, with the beekeeper providing shelter and care, and the bees producing honey and pollinating crops. The bees also produce other substances besides honey. Propolis is a resinous material that bees collect from tree buds and sap. They use it to seal cracks in the hive and to sterilize areas where they will lay eggs. Propolis has antimicrobial properties and is sometimes harvested by beekeepers for use in health products. Royal jelly is a special secretion that nurse bees produce to feed the larvae, and it is particularly important for the development of queen bees. Royal jelly is sometimes collected for use in dietary supplements, though this is done much less commonly than honey harvesting. Pollen is also collected by bees and brought back to the hive as a protein source for the colony. Beekeepers can harvest pollen by placing a trap at the hive entrance that scrapes the pollen from the bees' legs as they enter. The pollen falls into a collection tray below. Bee pollen is sold as a health supplement and is believed by some to have nutritional benefits. The seasonal rhythm of beekeeping follows the cycles of the plants and the weather. In spring, as flowers begin to bloom, the bees emerge from their winter dormancy and begin foraging again. The hive population grows rapidly during this time, with the queen laying eggs and new bees emerging to join the workforce. This is a busy time for both the bees and the beekeeper, as preparations are made for the main nectar flow. The main nectar flow is the period when the most flowers are blooming and the bees can gather the most nectar. This timing varies depending on location and climate, but it is typically in late spring or early summer. During the nectar flow, the bees work intensely, and the hive can fill with honey quickly. The beekeeper must be ready to add supers and to monitor the hive closely to ensure the bees have the space and resources they need. As summer progresses and flowers begin to fade, the nectar flow slows and eventually stops. The bees become less active in their foraging, as there is less food available in the environment. The beekeeper may harvest honey at the end of the flow, taking the surplus that has been stored in the supers. In late summer and fall, the beekeeper prepares the hive for winter. The bees must have enough honey stored to sustain them through the cold months when they cannot forage. The beekeeper checks the weight of the hive and the amount of stored honey, adding supplemental food if necessary. The bees are also checked for health issues, and treatments may be applied to protect them from mites and diseases. As winter approaches, the bees form a cluster inside the hive, huddling together to generate warmth. They consume the stored honey to fuel their bodies and maintain the temperature of the cluster. The queen stops laying eggs, and the hive population decreases. The bees remain in this state throughout the winter, waiting for the return of warm weather and blooming flowers. The beekeeper visits the hive less frequently in winter but still checks periodically to ensure the bees have enough food and that the hive is secure. Snow and ice are cleared from the entrance, and the hive is protected from harsh winds. The bees are largely left alone during this time, as opening the hive in cold weather can chill the cluster and harm the bees. When spring returns, the cycle begins again. The first warm days bring the bees out of the hive, and they take cleansing flights to eliminate waste that has accumulated during the winter confinement. The queen begins laying eggs again, and the hive population starts to rebuild. Early flowers provide the first sources of nectar and pollen, and the bees resume their work of gathering and storing food. The honey that was harvested in the previous season may still be stored in jars, waiting to be used or sold. Honey is a stable food product and does not require refrigeration or special storage conditions. It can sit on a shelf for years and remain edible, though its flavor and color may change slightly over time. Honey has been valued by humans for thousands of years, both as a food and as a medicine. Ancient civilizations harvested honey from wild bee colonies, climbing trees or cliffs to reach the hives. The bees were often killed or driven away, and the entire hive was destroyed to obtain the honey. This method was wasteful and unsustainable, but it was the only way people knew to obtain honey for a long time. The development of beekeeping as a practice allowed humans to harvest honey without destroying the colony. By providing artificial hives with removable frames, beekeepers can take honey while leaving the bees and their home intact. This makes it possible to harvest honey year after year from the same colony, and it benefits both the beekeeper and the bees. Modern beekeeping has become more sophisticated, with tools and techniques designed to maximize honey production while maintaining healthy bee colonies. Beekeepers have a better understanding of bee biology and behavior, and they use this knowledge to manage their hives more effectively. Protective equipment, smokers, extractors, and other tools make the work safer and more efficient. Despite these advances, the basic process of honey production has not changed. The bees still gather nectar from flowers, process it with enzymes, and store it in wax comb. The beekeeper still monitors the hive, harvests the surplus honey, and cares for the bees throughout the seasons. The partnership between humans and bees continues in much the same way it has for centuries. The taste of honey is immediately recognizable, sweet and smooth with subtle flavors that reflect its floral origins. Honey can be eaten on its own, spread on bread or biscuits, stirred into tea or coffee, or used as an ingredient in cooking and baking. Its natural sweetness makes it a popular alternative to refined sugar, and its complex flavor profile adds depth to dishes. Honey is used in traditional remedies for soothing sore throats and coughs. It has mild antimicrobial properties and can inhibit the growth of certain bacteria. A spoonful of honey before bed is said to promote restful sleep, and honey applied to minor wounds may help with healing. While these uses are traditional rather than scientifically proven, many people find honey helpful for these purposes. In baking, honey adds moisture and sweetness to cakes, cookies, and breads. It also helps baked goods stay moist longer, as honey retains water. Honey can replace sugar in recipes, though adjustments must be made to account for the liquid content of honey and its stronger sweetening power. Baked goods made with honey often have a distinct flavor and a softer texture. Honey is used to make mead, an alcoholic beverage created by fermenting honey with water and yeast. Mead is one of the oldest known alcoholic drinks, with evidence of its production dating back thousands of years. The fermentation process converts the sugars in honey into alcohol, creating a drink that can range from sweet to dry and from still to sparkling. Honey can also be used to sweeten other fermented beverages, such as beer or wine, adding complexity to their flavor. Some brewers and winemakers use honey as a portion of the fermentable sugars, creating hybrid drinks that combine the characteristics of honey and the primary ingredients. The beekeeper's year is structured around the needs of the bees and the rhythms of the seasons. Winter is a time of rest and planning, with equipment maintained and supplies gathered for the coming year. Spring brings the renewal of activity, with hive inspections and preparations for the nectar flow. Summer is the peak season for honey production, with harvests taken and honey processed. Fall is a time of preparation again, ensuring the bees have what they need to survive the winter. Each hive is unique, with its own personality and productivity. Some colonies are more productive than others, filling supers with honey quickly and requiring frequent attention. Others may be slower or may face challenges from pests, diseases, or environmental factors. The beekeeper learns to work with each colony's characteristics, providing support where needed and taking advantage of strong colonies for honey production. Pests and diseases are a constant concern in beekeeping. Varroa mites are small parasites that attach to bees and weaken them by feeding on their blood and transmitting viruses. These mites can devastate a hive if left untreated. Beekeepers monitor mite levels and apply treatments when necessary, using methods that are effective against the mites but safe for the bees and the honey. Other pests include wax moths, which lay eggs in the hive, and their larvae eat the wax comb. Small hive beetles are another pest that can damage comb and contaminate honey. Mice may invade hives in fall and winter, seeking shelter and food. The beekeeper must be vigilant and take measures to protect the hives from these threats. Diseases can also affect bees, including bacterial and fungal infections that harm the brood or adult bees. American foul brood is a serious bacterial disease that can kill a colony and is highly contagious to other hives. European foul brood is less severe but still requires management. Nosema is a fungal disease that affects the digestive system of bees. Beekeepers must be able to recognize signs of disease and take appropriate action to treat or contain it. The health of the bees is tied to the health of the environment. Bees require diverse sources of nectar and pollen throughout the season, and a lack of forage can weaken colonies. Pesticide exposure is a significant threat, as chemicals used in agriculture can poison bees or impair their ability to navigate and forage. Habitat loss reduces the availability of wildflowers and nesting sites for bees. Beekeepers can support their bees by planting bee-friendly flowers and avoiding the use of pesticides in their own gardens and around the hives. Creating habitat for bees benefits not only managed hives but also wild pollinators that play crucial roles in ecosystems and agriculture. The process of extracting and bottling honey is a rewarding culmination of the beekeeper's work and the bees' efforts. Seeing the jars filled with golden honey, knowing the journey from flower to jar, connects the beekeeper to the natural world and to the ancient tradition of working with bees. Honey varies from harvest to harvest, from hive to hive, and from season to season. Each batch is unique, influenced by the flowers available, the weather conditions, and the characteristics of the bee colony. This variability is part of honey's charm, offering a range of flavors and experiences that cannot be replicated by standardized products. Some beekeepers sell their honey locally, at farmers markets, or through small shops. Customers appreciate the opportunity to buy honey from a known source and to support local agriculture. The beekeeper can share the story of the honey, explaining how it was produced and what makes it special. This connection between producer and consumer adds value beyond the honey itself. Other beekeepers produce honey on a larger scale, managing many hives and harvesting larger quantities. The honey may be sold to wholesalers or packaged under a brand and distributed more widely. Even in larger operations, the same basic principles apply, with the beekeeper ensuring the health of the bees and the quality of the honey. The jars of honey that sit on shelves, whether in a home kitchen or a store, represent the work of many beings. The flowers produce the nectar, drawing energy from the sun and nutrients from the soil. The bees collected the nectar, transformed it through biological processes, and stored it carefully. The beekeeper tended the hives, harvested the honey, and prepared it for use. Each jar is a collaboration between nature and human effort. Opening a jar of honey releases a subtle aroma, a hint of flowers and sweetness. The honey pours slowly from the jar, thick and viscous, its color ranging from pale gold to deep amber. A spoonful of honey dissolves on the tongue, releasing its sweetness and its complex flavors. The taste is pure and natural, a direct connection to the blooms that fed the bees. Honey spread on warm bread melts slightly, soaking into the bread and adding sweetness to every bite. Honey stirred into tea swirls through the hot liquid, sweetening it and adding a floral note. Honey drizzled over yogurt or fruit provides a natural sweetness that complements the tartness of the dairy or the freshness of the fruit. In cooking, honey can glaze roasted vegetables or meats, creating a caramelized coating that is both sweet and savory. Honey in marinades tenderizes meat and adds depth to the flavor. Honey in salad dressings balances acidity and brings a subtle sweetness that enhances the vegetables. Honey can be infused with herbs or spices to create flavored varieties. Lavender honey, rosemary honey, or chili honey are examples of honey that has been steeped with additional flavors. These infusions are made by adding the herbs or spices to the honey and allowing them to sit together, with the honey gradually taking on the additional flavors. Honeycomb can be chewed like gum, with the honey released as the wax is broken by the teeth. The wax itself is flavorless and can be chewed for a while before being spit out or swallowed. Eating honeycomb provides the full experience of the honey as the bees made it, complete with the structure they built to hold it. The cycle of honey production continues year after year, with each season bringing new blooms and new opportunities for the bees to gather nectar. The beekeeper tends the hives through all the seasons, adapting to changes in the weather, the availability of flowers, and the needs of the bees. The relationship between beekeeper and bees is one of stewardship and respect, with the beekeeper facilitating the bees' work and sharing in the harvest they produce. The bees themselves are remarkable creatures, small and seemingly fragile, yet capable of complex behaviors and remarkable feats. They communicate through dances, navigate using the sun and magnetic fields, and work together in a coordinated way that allows the colony to function as a superorganism. Understanding the bees and their needs is key to successful beekeeping and to appreciating the honey they produce. As the sun sets over the field of flowers, the bees return to the hive, their day of foraging complete. The hive is quiet on the outside, but inside, the work continues. House bees process the nectar brought in by the foragers. Nurse bees tend to the young, and guard bees watch the entrance. The hive is a place of constant activity, all directed toward the survival and prosperity of the colony. The beekeeper, too, rests after a day of work, satisfied with the progress of the season and the health of the hives. Plans are made for the next visit, tasks are noted that need attention, and the honey already harvested waits in jars, ready to be enjoyed. The cycle continues, each part flowing into the next, a rhythm that has persisted for as long as bees have made honey and humans have sought it. The connection between bees and flowers is essential to the production of honey and to the reproduction of many plants. As bees move from flower to flower collecting nectar, they inadvertently transfer pollen from one bloom to another. This pollination allows the plants to produce seeds and fruit, ensuring the next generation of plants. Without bees and other pollinators, many plants would fail to reproduce, and ecosystems would suffer. Agriculture depends heavily on pollination by bees. Many crops, including fruits, vegetables, and nuts, require pollination to produce their harvest. Farmers often rely on managed bee colonies to pollinate their fields, and beekeepers may transport hives to farms during blooming periods to provide the service. The relationship between agriculture and beekeeping is mutually beneficial, with crops providing forage for bees and bees providing essential pollination for crops. The value of bees extends beyond the honey they produce. Their role as pollinators is crucial to food production and to the health of natural ecosystems. Protecting bees and supporting their populations is important for environmental and agricultural sustainability. Beekeepers contribute to this effort by maintaining healthy colonies and by advocating for practices that protect bees. The hive in winter is a quiet place, with the bees clustered inside and the entrance still. Snow may accumulate on the roof, and ice may form at the entrance, but inside, the bees are warm. The cluster generates heat by shivering their flight muscles, and the bees rotate positions so that those on the outside, who become cold, can move to the interior to warm up. The queen is kept at the center of the cluster, protected and kept warm by the workers. The bees consume honey throughout the winter to fuel their bodies and maintain the heat of the cluster. They do not defecate inside the hive. Holding their waste until a warm day allows them to take a cleansing flight outside. On mild winter days, the bees may briefly leave the hive, flying around to eliminate waste and to stretch their wings before returning to the cluster. The beekeeper checks the hive periodically in winter, lifting it slightly to gauge its weight. A heavy hive indicates the bees have plenty of stored honey, while a light hive suggests they may be running low. If the hive is too light, the beekeeper may provide supplemental food, such as fondant or sugar cakes, placed inside the hive where the bees can access it. This supplemental feeding helps ensure the colony survives until spring when fresh forage becomes available again. As the days begin to lengthen in late winter, the queen starts laying eggs again, even though it is still cold outside. The colony begins to prepare for the coming season, raising new bees that will emerge in time to take advantage of the first flowers. The hive starts to become more active, and the beekeeper begins to prepare for the busy season ahead. The first hive inspections of spring reveal the state of the colony after winter. The beekeeper looks for signs of the queen, such as eggs and larvae, and checks the population of the hive. A strong colony will have filled several frames with brood, indicating that the queen is healthy and laying well. The bees will be active and bringing in pollen, a sign that they are feeding the developing brood. If the colony is weak or the queen is not performing well, the beekeeper may take steps to strengthen the hive or replace the queen. Adding frames of brood from a strong colony can boost a weak one, and a new queen can revitalize a colony that has lost its queen or has a failing queen. The beekeeper must be attentive to the needs of each colony and responsive to problems that arise. The bees begin to build up their population rapidly in spring, and the beekeeper must ensure they have enough space. Adding frames and boxes gives the bees room to expand and prevents overcrowding, which can lead to swarming. Swarming is a natural process by which a colony reproduces, with the old queen and a portion of the workers leaving the hive to establish a new colony elsewhere. While swarming is natural, it reduces the population of the original hive and can decrease honey production. To prevent swarming, the beekeeper provides ample space for the bees and monitors the hive for signs that swarming is being prepared. These signs include the presence of queen cells, special larger cells in which new queens are raised. If the beekeeper finds queen cells, they may remove them or split the hive, creating two colonies from one. Splitting the hive satisfies the bee's impulse to reproduce while allowing the beekeeper to maintain control and increase the number of hives. As flowers bloom in greater numbers, the bees have more forage available, and the hive fills with nectar and pollen. The beekeeper continues to monitor the hives, checking for adequate space, signs of disease or pests, and the overall health and productivity of the colony. The supers are added as needed, stacked on top of the hive to provide storage for the incoming honey. The bees work with remarkable efficiency during the nectar flow. A forager bee may visit hundreds of flowers in a single trip, and a strong hive may have thousands of foragers out at any given time. The cumulative effort of the colony results in the collection of large amounts of nectar, which is processed into honey and stored in the comb. The hive becomes heavier as the stores accumulate, and the beekeeper can sense this added weight when lifting or inspecting the hive. The beekeeper's relationship with the bees is one of observation and gentle intervention. The bees know how to do their work and will do it without human assistance. But the beekeeper's role is to provide optimal conditions and to remove obstacles that might hinder the bees. This might mean providing space, managing pests, ensuring adequate ventilation, or protecting the hive from predators. Throughout the season, the beekeeper keeps notes on each hive, recording inspections, observations, and actions taken. These notes help the beekeeper track the progress of each colony and identify patterns or issues that need attention. Beekeeping is as much about learning and observation as it is about managing bees, and the beekeeper's understanding deepens with experience. As the peak of the season passes and flowers begin to fade, the beekeeper prepares to harvest the honey. The timing of the harvest depends on the local climate and flora, but it typically occurs in mid to late summer. The beekeeper checks the frames to ensure that the honey is capped and ready, and then the process of removing the frames and extracting the honey begins. The harvest is a time of reward for the beekeeper, the culmination of months of work and the bees' efforts. The golden honey, stored in jars and labeled, represents the productivity of the hive and the health of the ecosystem that supports the bees. The honey is a gift from the bees, shared with the beekeeper in exchange for the care and shelter provided. After the harvest, the beekeeper returns the empty frames to the hive, and the bees clean them and prepare them for future use. The hive continues to function, with the bees foraging as long as flowers remain and storing honey for their own needs. The beekeeper ensures that enough honey is left for the bees, so they have adequate stores for the winter. As fall arrives, the beekeeper begins the preparations for winter once again. The hive is checked for structural soundness, the entrance is reduced to help the bees defend against intruders, and the stores are assessed. The bees start to slow their activity as the temperatures drop and flowers become scarce. The colony begins to contract, with the queen reducing her egg laying and the population decreasing. The bees cluster together more frequently, conserving warmth as the nights become cooler. The hive becomes quieter, with fewer bees coming and going. The beekeeper's visits become less frequent, allowing the bees to settle in for the winter. The cycle is complete, and the pattern will begin again in spring. The honey that has been harvested and bottled is now part of kitchens and pantries, ready to be used and enjoyed. Each jar holds within it the essence of the flowers, the work of the bees, and the care of the beekeeper. It is a simple product in many ways, yet it represents a complex and beautiful process that connects plants, insects, and humans in a relationship that has existed for millennia. Honey is more than just a sweet food. It is a symbol of the interconnectedness of nature, a reminder that the health of one species affects many others. The bees depend on the flowers depend on the bees for pollination, and humans depend on both for food and for the health of the environment. This web of relationships is delicate and must be nurtured and protected. The taste of honey varies with the seasons and the flowers available to the bees. Spring honey, made from early blooms like fruit blossoms and dandelions, is often light and mild. Summer honey, from clover, wildflowers, and other peak season blooms, may be more robust and golden. Fall honey, from late-blooming plants like goldenrod and asters, can be darker and have a stronger flavor. Each season's honey is distinct, a reflection of the time and place of its creation. Some beekeepers keep hives in different locations, moving them to follow the blooms or to take advantage of different floral sources. This practice, called migratory beekeeping, allows for the production of varietal honeys and ensures that the bees have forage throughout the season. The hives are loaded onto trucks and transported to new locations, where they are set up and allowed to forage on the local plants. Migratory beekeeping requires careful planning and coordination, as the hives must be moved at night when the bees are inside, and they must be secured properly for transport. The bees experience some disruption from the move, but they quickly adapt to their new surroundings and begin foraging on the available flowers. This practice is common in areas where pollination services are needed for crops, such as almonds, blueberries, and apples. For the stationary beekeeper, the hives remain in one location throughout the year, and the honey reflects the local flora. This local honey is valued for its connection to a specific place and for its potential benefits to those who live in the area. Some people believe that consuming local honey can help with seasonal allergies, as it contains small amounts of local pollen that may help the body build tolerance. While this is not scientifically proven, many people find local honey beneficial. The process of making honey is the same regardless of the beekeeper's approach. The bees gather nectar, process it, and store it as honey. The beekeeper monitors the hives, harvests the surplus, and prepares it for use. The variations come in the types of flowers the bees visit and the specific practices of the beekeeper, but the essence of honey production remains constant. The jars of honey on a shelf are a snapshot of a moment in time. They capture the blooms of a particular season, the work of a particular colony of bees, and the care of a particular beekeeper. Each jar is unique, even if they appear similar on the surface. The honey inside has its own character, subtle differences in flavor, color, and aroma that reflect its origins. Opening a new jar of honey is a small ritual, breaking the seal and lifting the lid to reveal the contents. The honey may be clear and liquid, or it may have begun to crystallize, showing a cloudy appearance. Either form is perfectly good, and the honey can be used as is or warmed to return it to a liquid state. The first taste from a new jar is always a moment of discovery, learning what this particular honey has to offer. Honey is generous in its uses, equally at home in sweet and savory dishes, in hot and cold preparations, in simple applications and complex recipes. It is a pantry staple, a natural sweetener, and a comfort food. It connects us to the natural world and to the creatures that produce it. It is a reminder of the abundance that nature provides when we work with it respectfully. The bees do not make honey for humans. They make it for themselves as food to sustain the colony through times when nectar is not available. The fact that they produce more than they need in times of plenty is what allows humans to harvest the surplus. This surplus is a result of the bees' efficiency and the richness of the environment they inhabit. The beekeeper's role is to steward this relationship, ensuring that the bees have what they need while also benefiting from the honey they produce. It is a balance that requires knowledge, attention, and respect. The beekeeper does not dominate the bees but works with them, understanding their behavior and their needs, and making decisions that support the health and productivity of the colony. The honey that results from this partnership is a product of cooperation between species. The bees do what they have always done, following instincts and patterns refined over millions of years of evolution. The beekeeper provides support and removes obstacles, facilitating the bees' work and sharing in the harvest. The honey is a bridge between the human and natural worlds, a tangible result of working with nature rather than against it. As the seasons turn and the years pass, the cycle continues. Flowers bloom, bees forage, honey is made, and the beekeeper harvests the surplus. The hive endures, adapting to changes in weather, flora, and conditions, but maintaining its purpose and its patterns. The beekeeper learns and grows in understanding, becoming more attuned to the rhythms of the bees and the environment. Each jar of honey tells a story, though it is a quiet story, told in subtle flavors and golden colors. It is a story of flowers opening to the sun, of bees flying tirelessly between blossoms, of enzymes working to transform nectar into honey, of wax comb being filled and capped, of a beekeeper gently harvesting the surplus, of honey being extracted and filtered and bottled. It is a story of nature's abundance and human care. The honey sits patiently in its jar, ready to be poured and tasted and enjoyed. It does not hurry or demand attention. It simply is, waiting quietly until it is needed. A spoonful added to tea on a cold morning, a drizzle over breakfast on a lazy Sunday, a taste straight from the jar when a sweet craving strikes. The honey offers itself without reservation, fulfilling the purpose for which it was made. The bees continue their work, unaware of the human appreciation for their product. They build and forage and tend their young and their queen. They respond to the changes of the seasons, preparing for winter or gearing up for the nectar flow. They defend their home from intruders and care for each other. The colony functions as a unit, each bee playing its part in the survival and success of the whole. The beekeeper watches over the hives, present but not intrusive, helpful but not controlling. The bees are allowed to be bees, following their nature and their instincts. The beekeeper intervenes only when necessary, to prevent disease, to provide space, to harvest honey. The rest of the time, the bees are left to do what they do best. The relationship between beekeeper and bees is ancient, stretching back thousands of years, to when humans first discovered that the golden substance produced by bees was not only edible but delicious and valuable. Over time, the methods have been refined and improved, but the core relationship remains the same. Humans provide shelter and care, and bees produce honey and pollinate plants. In a world that often moves quickly and demands instant results, beekeeping offers a slower pace and a connection to natural rhythms. The bees cannot be rushed. They will produce honey in their own time, according to the availability of nectar and the health of the colony. The beekeeper learns patience and observation, tuning in to the subtle signs that indicate the state of the hive and the needs of the bees. This slower pace is reflected in the honey itself. It is not a product that can be manufactured quickly or in isolation. It requires the cooperation of many bees, the presence of flowering plants, the passage of time for nectar to be transformed into honey. It cannot be rushed or simplified beyond a certain point without losing its essence. The honey in the jar is a culmination of countless small actions and natural processes. Each drop of nectar collected, each addition of enzymes, each moment of evaporation, each cell capped with wax, all contribute to the final product. The honey is the sum of all these small efforts, a collective achievement that no single bee could accomplish alone. This collective nature of honey production mirrors the structure of the hive itself. The colony is a superorganism, with individual bees functioning like cells in a body, each performing specialized tasks that contribute to the whole. The queen lays eggs, the workers forage and build and nurse and clean and guard, and the drones mate with new queens to ensure genetic diversity. Together, they create a functioning, thriving unit that is greater than the sum of its parts. The beekeeper is an outsider to this system, but one who has been allowed in through centuries of domestication and cooperation. The bees do not work for the beekeeper, but their surplus can be shared. The beekeeper does not command the bees, but can guide and support them. It is a partnership based on mutual benefit and respect. The honey that comes from this partnership is valued for many reasons. Its sweetness is appealing, its flavor complex and varied. Its natural origin and minimal processing make it attractive to those seeking whole foods. Its long history of use in human cultures gives it a sense of tradition and continuity. Its association with bees and flowers connects it to the natural world. Beyond its use as food, honey has been used in many other ways throughout history. It has been used as a preservative, as its low water content and acidic pH create an environment where bacteria cannot grow. Fruits and meats were preserved in honey in ancient times, stored for months or even years without spoiling. Honey has been used in wound care, as its antimicrobial properties help prevent infection and promote healing. Honey has been used in cosmetics and skin care for its moisturizing properties and its pleasant scent. It has been used in religious and cultural ceremonies as an offering or a symbol of abundance and sweetness. Honey has been used as currency and as a gift, valued for its rarity and its desirability. The many uses of honey reflect its versatility and its enduring value to human societies. In modern times, honey is readily available and relatively inexpensive compared to how it was valued in the past. Supermarkets carry honey in various forms and from various sources, making it accessible to almost everyone. Yet despite its availability, honey retains a sense of specialness, a connection to nature that is increasingly rare in modern life. The small-scale beekeeper, managing a few hives in a backyard or on a small farm, participates in this tradition on a personal level. The honey produced by these bees is often shared with friends and family, given as gifts, or sold locally. It is a product made with care in small quantities and with attention to the health of the bees and the quality of the honey. Large-scale beekeeping operations produce honey in much greater quantities, managing hundreds or even thousands of hives. The honey from these operations is processed and packaged on a larger scale, distributed through commercial channels to reach a wide market. The principles of beekeeping remain the same, but the scale and the methods are adapted to handle the increased production. Regardless of scale, the process of making honey starts with the bees and the flowers. The nectar is collected, transformed, and stored by the bees, following patterns that have remained unchanged for millions of years. The beekeeper facilitates this process and harvests the surplus, but the bees are the true makers of honey. The honey in its jar is a finished product, ready to be used and enjoyed. Yet it also represents a beginning, as the honey will nourish those who consume it, providing energy and sweetness. The cycle continues, with the honey consumed and new honey being made, seasons passing and bees continuing their work. The beekeeper tends the hives through another year, experiencing the rhythms of the seasons and the bees. The work is sometimes challenging, dealing with pests and diseases, and weather that is too hot or too cold or too dry or too wet. But the work is also rewarding, providing honey and a connection to nature and the satisfaction of caring for the bees. The flowers bloom again in spring, offering their nectar to the bees. The bees respond as they always have, flying out from the hive to gather the sweet liquid. The nectar is brought back to the hive, passed from bee to bee, enriched with enzymes and stored in wax cells. The bees fan the nectar with their wings, evaporating water and concentrating the sugars, transforming nectar into honey. The process is slow and patient, unfolding over days and weeks. The bees work without rest, driven by instinct and the needs of the colony. The honey accumulates in the comb, cell by cell, frame by frame, until the stores are full and capped. The beekeeper checks the hive and finds the frames heavy with honey, ready to be harvested. The harvest is performed carefully, with respect for the bees and their work. The frames are removed, the bees gently brushed away, and the frames are taken for extraction. The caps are removed, the honey is spun out in the extractor, and it flows into containers where it is filtered and prepared for bottling. The honey is golden and thick, fragrant with the scent of flowers. It is poured into jars, sealed, and labeled, ready to be stored or shared or sold. Each jar is a small miracle, a transformation of sunlight and flowers and bee labor into a substance that is both food and medicine and sweetness itself. The beekeeper places the jars on a shelf, a row of golden containers that glow in the light. The jars are satisfying to look at, tangible proof of the season's work and the bees' productivity. The honey will be used throughout the year, enjoyed in many ways, until the jars are empty and the cycle begins again. The bees return to their work, foraging as long as flowers are available. The colony prepares for the coming winter, storing honey for their own use and ensuring the survival of the hive. The beekeeper prepares as well, making sure the bees have what they need and that the hive is secure and protected. Winter comes, and the hive is quiet. The bees cluster inside, consuming their stored honey to stay warm. The beekeeper checks the hive occasionally, ensuring the bees are safe and have enough food. The hive sits in the cold, a small fortress of life and warmth in the frozen landscape. Spring arrives once more, and the cycle begins again. The flowers bloom, the bees emerge, and the work of gathering nectar and making honey starts anew. The beekeeper opens the hive and finds the colony strong and active, ready for another season. The rhythm continues, as it has for as long as bees have made honey and humans have tended them. The honey in the jar waits patiently, as it always does. It is a gift from the bees, a product of nature, a sweetness that connects those who taste it to the flowers and the fields and the patient work of the hive. The honey is simple and pure, made by a process that has not changed in countless generations. It is honey, golden and sweet, made by bees.